Good morning. How's everyone doing? My name is Thomas Macaulay. I'm a senior reporter at the Next Web. We've got three fabulous panelists joining us on stage. I'd like to introduce them one by one. First of all, Karin Nemec, the co-founder and CEO of Grünfin, a sustainable investing platform for people who care about their impact. Next up, we have Andreas Helbig, a partner at Atomico. Andreas focuses on the Nordic and Baltic regions as a generalist and on vertical SaaS, SMB SaaS, and B2B marketplaces as a theme. And finally, we have Priit Salumaa, who is the CEO and co-founder at Better Medicine, which builds intelligent tools for doctors fighting cancer. Priit has been building software and companies for 23 years and has also co-founded a bunch of non-profits. And we're going to be discussing a subject that I think is relevant to a lot of our audience, which is how to fundraise during an economic downturn. All three of our panelists have got very different experiences of this on both the fundraising side and the investing side. And I was wondering if, to start, you wouldn't mind just telling the audience a little bit about your own experiences of this subject.
Hello, everyone. So I'm Karin. I'm a co-founder and CEO at Grünfin. Grünfin is a sustainable investing platform for people who care about impact. So we are a seed stage company. So we have fundraised 2 times, or actually 3 times, I would say. The first time was this FFF, like founders and fools put money. Then second time was 2 million, 2021, October, and then 2022, December. So, and I would say that 2021 was like a sunshine party. People were throwing money at us, so we had to really say people that we don't want anymore. So we really thought that, okay, we don't want to overtake or overpromise for investors to have good valuation and take enough money to reach us that far. What we didn't know at that time, that macroeconomic changes. And 2022, in June, we started to fundraise again, and it was like a night. So at first, June, we started to set not so, as the financial markets started to fluctuate, Ukrainian war started, energy crisis, you clearly saw that VC funds itself were also shocked. You know, they didn't know what to do. After summer, they came back. They felt like, oh, it maybe will recover, nothing will change. And we fundraised. We spoke more than 100 VC funds compared to, I think, 2021, which was 20. So we didn't want to talk too much at that time. And then I remember very well the second half of September. At first, it seemed very promising. 20 VCs said, oh, let's look more into it, and so on. But then week by week, they said, okay, we want to wait 6 months. We want to wait 9 months. But for a founder, you have wasted so much time talking to them, and you couldn't deliver growth. For us, I would say that say no to the founders when you don't want to invest fast enough, or really see the positive things. Because what I'm afraid what happened at that time, second half of 2022, is it was like a disruption in financial market, which happened 2008, the same in VC market. So, and we also see now in the same area where we started, half of our competitors couldn't fundraise, so we have less competition.
And well, we're a VC fund, so we are kind of fundraising is what we do every day. So we're very much, of course, subject to that. And yeah, I think sort of it's hard to argue with that we're definitely in an economic downturn. And therefore, well, things have changed. I'm happy to, of course, dive into the details of what has changed in investor sentiment, what people are looking for, etc. But there's clearly a change to the heydays of 2020 and 2021, which is not exclusively negative, I would say. Yeah, but of course, well, we're very close to the subject because we are the ones people go to when they want to fundraise, so which is good.
I think my experience is very similar to Karin's, but on the pre-seed stage. So we've fundraised so far 2 tranches of pre-seed. one second half of 21 and the other one second half of 22. And the experience was very different as yours. But maybe a little bit of background is that I've seen how fundraising happens in two economic downturns. One startup where I was among the first hires, went through fundraising 2009 unsuccessfully. And the startup had an amazing team there. So among them were Jan Tallinn and Ahti Heinla, even if you know who they are. But everything was completely frozen then. And when the Ukraine war started, and we're like Estonian-Ukrainian startup, half of my co-founders are Ukrainian, and when the crypto market crash happened, then I sniffed the air and felt, oh my God, this smells like 2009. And this moment I started looking into the runway, freezing the cost level or bringing it down a little bit, and fundraising right away for second half of the pre-seed. And as Karin said, summer was completely silent, dead, and we succeeded last quarter, last year. And it was very different because the first round was more like an exclusive advisory round. I was going around, maybe spoke to 20, 30 people, oversubscribed, said, no, I'm going to leave some people out, leave some people in. And then the second round is, by the way, not closed yet. But I did close like $500,000 or close to $500,000. And for this, I went through 83 contacts. It's like hard sales work. So this is like a completely different experience.
So some different experiences and some similarities, but do you think that they vary a lot in terms of the stage of fundraising you're looking for? You mentioned, for example, your experience with pre-seed. Does that chime a lot with what you might experience as an investor and for yourself as well as when you're trying to raise funds?
I think sort of the difference between pre-seed and Series A is that when we are predominantly a Series A and beyond fund, at Series A, you have already raised some money, so your cash journey is a little bit more deliberate. So you can make these small tweaks, as you were saying, right? So if you delay a few hires, if you maybe raise a small bridge from existing investors, which you have at that point in time, then you can plan a little bit more accordingly. And I think sort of this is really what happened last year, where in the second half, almost the funding market was entirely frozen because no companies were really coming to market because all companies had kind of planned for it, like at least the good companies had planned for it and like made small adjustments in order to prolong runway. And therefore, I think Series A is even more impacted, and there's like really, also if you look at the numbers, like funding has really slowed down for sure already in the second half of last year, but also in the beginning of this year. Because you can cash plan a little bit more deliberately here, so rounds are being pushed out. So we still expect lots of companies coming to market, but probably more towards sort of like early next year, late this year.
I have a maybe question to the,
Yes.
What do you think how long it will take? Because what I have hearing from, co-founder, other, founders is that, all the VCs are full of money. At the same time, there are less deals coming into it. For instance, like we managed to close the deal. Now I see, VCs are writing to me proactively, like 2021. That what do you see will the funding scenery change in coming? What will be the outcome of it? How long the decision-making process take place? So I think it's good to give some view on that.
Yeah, sure. Like even though some claim that VCs don't really have a crystal ball, so we don't really know how long it's going to last. We don't really know when things are all rosy again. I think sort of what I can say is that what kills investor sentiment more than a downturn is uncertainty about a downturn. And we had particularly sort of like from April-ish last year onwards, I think sort of the uncertainty was really there. Some funds really stopped investing entirely. We never did, but some funds did that. And now I think everyone, and maybe sort of the winter break around Christmas was quite helpful on that. Everyone, I think, on the VC side has really accepted this new reality of, well, interest rates are here to stay. Well, budgets, enterprise budgets might not be as quickly available as they used to. Consumer spending is constrained. There's just the new realities of it. And, well, our job as investors is to invest. So while I would say that the bar has probably gotten a bit higher to make investments, because there's an increased focus on efficiency, money's not as loose as it used to be. I think there's no fund, at least that I'm aware of, who is still stopping investing. People are active, people are looking around. There's still not that many companies coming to market because, as I mentioned before, right, the companies at Series A and beyond have a little bit more of a deliberate cash planning. But I would assume, well, the strong companies will always be able to raise. I think we will definitely see funding rounds. We might see less, yes, for sure. But the strong companies will always be able to raise. And when it will pick up again, I don't really know. But it would surprise me if there would be zero funding going forward.
Have your criteria changed over the 1 year?
Well, our criteria have changed in the sense that, well, I guess we've sort of like what lots of people are claiming, right? That, well, now there's an increased focus on efficiency. We've always looked at that. I think we just take strong pride in the fact that if we invest into a company, we really go super deep. We do like multiple 10s, 20s of expert calls, etc. Really trying to understand the market super, super deeply. And also look into all the numbers that the company is providing, because at Series A you can usually look at numbers. So we're always looking at efficiency. I think sort of there has been an increased focus of the market in general on efficiency, CAC payback times, overall burn multiple, etc. Like how much have you achieved with the money that you have raised. I think sort of what our criteria has a bit changed is that, of course, now with the new macroeconomic outlook, buying decisions are changing, both on the enterprise side. I think sort of this, I look a lot at SaaS, as you were mentioning before, Thomas. Like there's this like slightly famous saying now that all the bottom-up SaaS companies are about to hear from top-down, because there's now a bit of a tighter spending control. So we're looking at a bit more into that. What does the economic downturn really mean for the startups and their ability to go to market, to sell? That's what we're definitely looking into, and I think there's also has been a valuation reset. I mean, there's no denying that. That's also the valuations, which in the end is always just a price to invest into this company, right? It's not sort of the value of the company, but it's the price to invest. That has shifted, and that has shifted downwards.
I will add something from the pre-seed perspective, maybe, on this. The change what I saw was that it used to be good enough to have a pitch deck and the vision. And funnily enough, even for pre-seed fundraising, investors are looking for revenue traction already. Like, if you think this is, with pre-seed money, you build your proof of concept, what kind of revenue you are going to earn, especially if you're a deep tech company. But they do look for somehow for the revenue traction, and especially if you would today start raising a pre-seed, I would say that if you have some kind of like, I don't know, pre-agreements or something like this is gold. And if you start raising a seed round, some kind of revenue traction is like the thing to have. Because, how to say, the requirements obviously have jumped. And not a little, but a lot.
I agree. I, however, think that, well, we're not pre-seed investors, but if as a pre-seed investor you're looking for revenue, then you're probably doing something wrong by kind of sheer definition of what you're supposed to do. So I think pre-seed to me is still very much pre-revenue, maybe as you were saying, some early agreements, some early MVP or something, but pre-seed is still, in lots of cases, still 2 people or 3 people in a deck.
And the other maybe interesting thing, what I didn't think when I was, fundraising 2021, so to look really your investors, usually you go, your investors say we are founder friendly, we are backing you, pro rata, and so on. When the downturn happens, not every investor behave the same way. And I think that founders will remember it, founders will talk, and be aware how you behave and conscious. Really, that if you do that decision, I understand hard decisions need to be done. You cannot back. Do those fast, direct, explain why it is, but think it has consequences.
Definitely. Definitely.
And in terms of the types of technologies and companies that are attracting investment at the moment, do you see any big changes since the downturn?
Well, I think sort of like if you look at different sectors, right? So, and once again, I focus predominantly on SaaS. I think sort of there has been like a shift away from more point solutions to slightly more horizontal suites. I think sort of that's at least sort of what's happening on the B2B SaaS side. In terms of sectors, I think sort of the thing about venture investing is that we're investing in 5 to 10 year horizons. And coming back to the point I was making earlier, we definitely do not have a crystal ball of how things are going to look like in 5 to 10 years. But what we know and what we at least can anticipate on what the big problems are in 5 to 10 years. And therefore, I kind of see like almost like a rejuvenation of more deep tech. I think sort of it's becoming a lot more interesting. A lot more funds have become more interested in that because if you zoom out, if you zoom on the fundamentals of, well, what technology should be doing is should be focusing on the big problems in the world, and that includes climate, that includes health. I think so. If you both being very good representatives of that, and therefore I think sort of this is also like a little bit more of a zooming out on what are actually the big problems, and which definitely includes climate. I think it's one of the sectors where we've seen the most increased activity. We always do this State of European Tech report, and I think sort of there was definitely sort of the category with the most increased activity. And sort of like a little bit more kind of like consumer spending that is not entirely necessary. Like really sort of that's on the consumer side, we see that a little bit more affected, of course. So yeah, really, coming back to what I was saying earlier, we really try and understand sort of what's important, what does the current downturn mean for the company's ability to go to market, to sell.
I agree totally that world's biggest problems are the biggest opportunities. So you always have to turn the table. And sometimes what I see in investors' side, they are maybe too short-sighted. You know, Ukrainian war, earlier it was like climate, sustainability. It was quite, how to say, important after COVID. Somehow people understood that actually, you know, something can impact us so much, you know, the whole societies. And then now the sustainability or climate change for one year, it just disappeared in a public sentiment, but the problem didn't disappear. So you should, as you said, zoom out, look what are the big trends, and then zoom in again, is that the good way to solve it, I would say, because I always say to founders also that don't love your solution, love your problem, because most probably you find while you are talking to people, doing it, building different angle, the company or the product helping to solve it. So.
Sure. Completely agree. I would add to what kind of companies are maybe funded is one thing what I've noticed is that, again, if you're a company who can make revenue, meaning that maybe not that regulated sector like medtech would be, for example, it would be most likely easier today to fundraise. But the second thing is that hype is never dead. One of my friends is raising an investment fund in US, focusing only and only on large language model applications. So today we see how ChatGPT and GPT-4 have made waves. So if you're somebody who wants to do a startup, do something with ChatGPT, and you will most likely get funded. So crypto is dead, don't do that. Large language models, yeah.
I mean, it's always a little bit where lots of people are going. There's clearly something interesting, but there's also probably a little bit too many people going into that.
Most likely.
Which again, sort of like, it's about fundamental trends, right? And there's applications of crypto that are incredibly interesting, and we would never stop investing into the sector because there's a couple of long-term trends that we fundamentally believe in. And I think sort of with generative AI, I mean, it's a fundamentally incredibly exciting technology. I think everyone is still like figuring out what the exact applications are and what the business opportunities are. But yeah, I think that's definitely a space that gets a lot of attention these days, and out of which most is justified, but there's a little bit, it sometimes gets a little bit over the top.
I think the main point is that there are some things which never change, even in economic downturns, and these are hypes.
But still, I would say the downturn is usually also the moment when you have to revise your business model, really look at the hypothesis, why you built, how you have done. It's a good time to reflect because you have backwind, so that you don't have, or no, forewings, like you don't have back wing, but would just fly you without inefficiently. So you have to look what are the revenues. You know, I think it's really good now, and for us, it's also good that less competition. So, and I think that stronger companies will come out of that downturn.
I totally agree, and I would even add to this point in saying, like, if you look at sort of past downturns in like the 2008, 2009 days, so as companies like Stripe were founded, I think there's an element to, like, coming back to your earliest point that you were making, and that in 2020, 2021, people were throwing money around, but I think a lot of money, particularly in the early days, also makes you a bit complacent, or like, well, every problem that you have is going to be solved with hiring someone. You're spending a lot of money on things that are not really bringing your business forward in the long run. And so I think there's an element, there's a forcing function of having less capital available that makes companies more efficient and therefore more resilient. And I think actually particularly sort of the Baltic tech ecosystem that has historically not been showered with cash has exactly therefore been that strong. And I think sort of there's almost like, this is to me at least one of the very positive long-term notes of the current economic downturn is that, well, maybe your pre-seed round should not be 5 to 6 million. Maybe your pre-seed round should be around 1 million. And, well, if you build something great out of 1 million, that's probably more long-term durable, more efficient than what you build with 5 million and with 10,000 hires or whatever you can make with that.
I have only one larger problem, like zooming really out in Europe or having this downturn. So I went to last October, Davos in the desert in Saudi Arabia, and what they have done, they have invited a lot of startups in TTEP there to buy up the technology. So I'm sure that Chinese are doing the same because now it's a moment to get that technology very cheaply. So, but I would like at least the policymakers and those who fund, tell also VC fund, who they have given maybe like LPs some money to look strategic, that one. I'm afraid that we are, as you know, West has been so good at developing new technologies. We are like, how to say, giving that technology away and also killing the startup mentality and entrepreneurship, those who had maybe. Because downturn is also that I have an alternative to have a secure job, why I should, you know, work 16 hours, have like half the salary what I get somewhere else. You know, opportunity costs are there, and I think that those who are not really loving problem, purpose-driven, it's hard. It's hard to be a founder.
Definitely.
No shit.
Definitely. I have highest respect for it.
And in terms of the structure of companies, are there certain things you look for as positive signs during a downturn, and then maybe some that are more negative?
I think actually you said a couple of very positive things which sound bad. Is that your competitors who are not able to fundraise will be dead, meaning there will be less noise and less competition, and most likely after the downturn, when the investment money returns, you will be in a better position to fundraise your next round and next round. So this kind of like clutter or noise will be killed off. You mentioned the efficiency as well. So actually having this pressure to do more with less resources is good. And maybe, how to say, it's as healthy as having that much pressure that you would look for other funding sources like revenue, which is good, isn't it?
It's the best.
So I think these are the very positive aspects. They sound hard and they sound like, in a way, a lot of pressure, but these are actually good things about those things, if I may recap your thoughts.
I agree, especially this revenue point. This was also for us one learning point, that we should focus more on that to be less dependent on external financing and be also continuously in fundraising mode, not only to have that last moment, because it's super stressy, especially when people don't want to decide. Really, last 3 months, last year, it was not the nicest months of my life. So,
if I can add maybe one lesson, which is, I think, positive from a personal perspective and experience in this, is that I was rethinking how to fundraise in quite many aspects. So for the first tranche, I did like everybody did. You get some kind of like convertible note template out there, you get everybody saying yes, then you do signatures, and then everybody transfers you the money. And then I thought, but why do we have to do a capital call for every investor and then transfer the money? Why wouldn't I go and start getting the next round piece by piece? So instead of that, I changed the template into a single investor template, and every yes I got, I asked, please transfer the money. So what happened then was that I only had 2 months of runway left at some point when people started to say yeses. But then with 1 month, I already had extended the runway to 6 or 5 months or something like this. And then again and again, and this is the reason why I say that my round is still open, is that I said, look, we need 500,000 to survive until the end of this year, which is great, and we got the 500,000 together. But I said, but we can fundraise up to 750K in the second tranche. And then this leaves this kind of room that this took off the pressure. I could focus on product development for 4 months. I have not focused on fundraising after this kind of pedal to the metal. I throttled down, got to do something I really like as a founder, to build things. And at the same time, being open for this kind of inbound requests or something which comes in. Plus, keeping room for this kind of really value-add investors. Like, for example, there is a regulatory compliance consultancy in Germany we work with. Amazing guys. After working with them and paying their bills, they at some point came in and said, look, we know that we need to, you will have budgeted another half of that. Could we have this as an investment in your company? I said, sure. Look, these are the convertible note conditions. You can jump in right away. And they said, excellent. And another investor who adds a lot of value there on the board. So this kind of a thinking through that, do you have to fundraise like this is done always, or what the community usually sees as a standard? You can think other ways of funding as well. And obviously grants.
Priit just loves fundraising.
No, I hate fundraising. I've turned gray with a year. I used to have a white, lovely blonde hair like Karin. But now I turned gray because this is actually very stressful. I hate it. I hate sales work. I hate all of this, but I'm an engineer.
I would add one point to it, as I think sort of that fundraising is also, if you structure it in a round more at a point in time, it can be a very important strategic exercise, because what we have seen is that companies who have been preempted have never really sort of thoroughly thought about how to craft the story, how to refine the story, how to sharpen the story. It usually serves as a good check-in point for, is your vision, are your hypotheses when you start a company, are they still true? How do you need to sharpen them? How do you need to present the company in the best light? So I would also argue that fundraising, while it shouldn't last forever probably, because that's very much a distraction and turns founders gray, and is also, it's a helpful check-in point, it's a helpful strategic exercise to the company, as long as it doesn't last for too long.
And I like your point, because what I like about investors, not that they say yes, but they really think along and give honest feedback on that, on your business model, on your traction, whatever they like or dislike, because not everything is bad, not everything is good, that they help you through that discussion and feedback actually to get your business model stronger. They don't need to become yet the investors, but what I appreciate when they take this time, write feedback, why or why not they invest, it's super helpful for founders. So thank you if you do, Atomico. So, but for the rest who are here, I highly recommend, so it helps the founders. So.
Also pressure your VCs into that. When they say it's too early, then ask them, why is it too early, and what would you like to see at the next round? So I think there's always it's very hard to argue with a no. I wouldn't now try and do that. If it's a no, then it's very likely a no. But ask for details, because it can really help you inform, at least. You don't need to take everything that VCs take for granted, right? So VC advice can be great, can also not be great, but at least it helps you to form a view of what investors in the next stages are looking for or what they're not looking for.
+1 emoji.
But give honest feedback. That's also on my point, that not always people are ready to give. They say, okay, no, and they need to be kind and polite. I say, no, you don't need to. You need to be honest. The more you help us to become stronger in long term. And don't be afraid to say no, because what I see sometimes in VCs also, they don't reply, and that's the worst. This means that you don't have a relationship. Say no transparently.
It's a great thing about the Baltics is that there's no need for sugarcoating in these.
Yeah, but you don't have to be mean, though.
That's true.
I've seen this as well.
Really? Okay. It's hard.
I know obviously none of us have got crystal balls, but looking to the future, do you see this funding landscape changing, or is it just too hard to assess at this point?
I think we've reached a certain steady state now of, well, I mean, how long is that steady state going to last? But I think now we've reached a state of, I think everyone knows interest rates are here to stay. Everyone knows sort of, well, efficiency is important. Valuations are where they are. They're down from the 2021 highs. And now everyone is, I think, sort of like really willing to accept to this new reality. My guess is sort of that this reality that we have will probably be sticking around at least for the remainder of the year and probably for longer than that. And if we sort of see sort of like what would be, that's looking at the tech world only. If we look at the economic downturn more broadly, then of course there's whole other effects to it, sort of like when and if the economic will recover is like more budget for spending on, for example, software tools, more disposable income for consumers to spend on products. So I hope that sort of there's a more of a demand pull coming from a potential economic recovery at some point, but I'm absolutely no macroeconomist, so I have absolutely no clue when and how that's going to happen.
I don't have crystal ball, but I would assume that this year, still I think VCs are not so active, exactly looking the unit economics, the criteria are 5 times, harder, I would say, that 2 years ago. And then they recognize that less and less deals are coming in. So what do? We have this dry gunpowder. Our general partner or the LPs are asking that why do we sit? Okay, you tell that I have invested into my current companies and dealing, but if new innovation is not done and new entrepreneurship is not coming, then actually the tables will be turned. So I see in 2-3 years, the tables will turn. And the VCs need to build relationship now in order to be in the right time, right place with right companies, because it's getting tough again.
Interesting. We're almost out of time, but I wonder if we could end with just a short answer from each of you. If there was one piece of take-home advice that you could give to our audience, and many of whom are startup founders, what would it be about fundraising at this time?
Be resilient. I would say still even if it's tough, if you love your problem, if you have a great team, make it smaller even if it's possible, but you will figure it out if it's really meaningful what you're doing. And take time to revise what you're doing, because I think you have learned tons while building something. And from those learning to see that if it's really something which has a tailwind and good things to pursue, or is it something what we have to pivot? So don't be afraid. Don't do your decision based on what you did in the past, but more on the future. So
I think historically fundraising has always been hard, maybe except for the second half of 2020 and 2021. So this was very clearly the exception that fundraising was easy. So I think fundraising is and will be a hard exercise for founders. As you say, it's hard to be a founder. It's difficult. It's not for the weak. And that's exactly why founders are creating great companies. So I think one can argue for ages about, oh my God, the macroeconomic climate is down. But in the end, the only thing that really helps is to be heads down and to build a great company. And if you go out fundraising and to do it well, craft the story well, present the metrics well, leverage your existing investors to help you craft a story, help you reach out to the right people, find the right contacts. And it will still be hard. And some companies will not be able to make it. And that's a bit part of if you zoom out, then it's kind of like the natural part of the tech universe. And if you zoom in, then it's horrible for everyone who's involved in that particular instance. But fundraising is hard, and it will likely be hard in the years to come.
Cut down your costs, extend your runway, but that was said already. Start fundraising early. Be clever about fundraising early. Fundraising starts also getting the feedback in, because it's like a loop. After you've done it 80 times, you're definitely better on the 80th time than the first time. Also, if you're a small team, don't do it alone in your team. Have like a team effort, like 2 people at least, like a wing woman or wing man next to you. This helps to avoid burnout and despair, because you will get such amounts of maybe hard feedback you don't agree with, but the hardest feedback is always the one you agree with, but you don't have good answers for this. You need to figure this shit out yourself. And then you can also reply, look, this is exactly the risk you as an investor take, because you should trust me that it's in my best interest to figure this shit out, and I will. And I think this kind of like an attitude, not losing hope, is super important, and taking care of your mental health as well. Super important. Yeah, I think we should do another track on mental health. I have such, like with 1.5 years, I've grown as a person from this perspective a lot, and fundraising has pushed me a lot to do that.
So yeah, tough times, but yeah, make tough people and tough startups. We're all out of time. I'd like to thank our panelists for joining us, and also the audience for being here. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.